Here's what they'll never tell you about the Titanic rescue. Everyone knows the story. An icy night, a radio operator sends an SOS with a Marconi apparatus, saving 700 people. Guglielmo Marconi, a hero, a Nobel laureate, the father of radio. But what if I told you that the hero of this story isn't who he seems? What if the rescue of hundreds of lives cast the shadow of another man whose name was intentionally erased from history? I'm about to reveal the most closely guarded secret in the history of technology. The official version seems unassailable. There he is, Marconi, a genius, an entrepreneur, a media darling. In 1909, the Nobel Committee awarded him the prize in recognition of his services in the development of wireless telegraphy. He is the sole and undisputed creator of the technology that connected the world, a man who, according to contemporaries, held the globe in his fist. This is the monument we are about to dismantle. But why then in Russia is Alexander Popov considered the national hero inventor? What documents, published decades later, prove that his device was operational several years earlier? We're talking about the protocol of a meeting from the Journal of the Russian Physico-Chemical Society from 1895, a document that was accessible to the entire scientific community of Europe. And the main question, how did one man manage to claim all the glory while another remained a footnote in textbooks? In this video, we will conduct an investigation. We'll break down, frame by frame, who invented what and when. We will compare their technologies, examine patents, and uncover the invisible force that decides whose name enters history. And we'll start not with Marconi, but with a man who, 7 years before the Titanic disaster, was already transmitting radio signals in Kronstadt. Not in the quiet of a laboratory, but in real-world conditions, providing communication between the warships Europe and Africa at a distance of 30 miles. Before we continue, ask yourself, what is more important, to create something first or to be the first to tell the world about it? This is the classic first mover versus first scaler dilemma. To be the first to invent or the first to scale. The answer to this question determines the winners and losers, not only in the 19th century but also in your business today. So here he is, our first player, Alexander Popov. Forget the image of the genius entrepreneur. Popov is not an aristocrat, not a businessman. He is the son of a rural priest, a physics instructor at the mine officer class in Kronstadt. His world is not high society salons, but a laboratory with copper wire and flasks. And his initial goal was not global communication, but a much more down-to-earth task, to create a device that could detect distant thunderstorms to warn ships at sea. He was solving a specific problem, not building a technological empire. The scene was as follows. May 7, 1895, St. Petersburg. A meeting of the Russian Physico-Chemical Society. Popov presents his device, which he modestly calls a lightning detector. He turns on the transmitter, and a receiver several tens of meters away comes to life. It doesn't just blink a light, it makes an electric bell ring. The invisible became audible, and the first words transmitted by radio in human history were Heinrich Hertz. This is not a random set of letters. It is a tribute to the scientist who discovered electromagnetic waves, a scientific homage, understandable only to the initiated. And this is a documented fact. A year before Marconi filed his first patent application. So why didn't the world erupt in applause? 2 reasons. The first was military secrecy. The Admiralty, seeing the technology's potential for the fleet, imposed a ban on widespread publications. The second reason was Popov's own scientific idealism. He believed that discoveries belonged to all humanity and didn't think about commercial gain. Popov published a brilliant recipe in a scientific journal for free. Marconi took that recipe, refined it a bit, and built a global fast food chain on its foundation. Popov simply didn't apply for a patent. Imagine for a second a different scenario. 1895. Popov goes not to the military, but to investors. A year later, communication stations are built across Russia, transmitting stock market reports and private telegrams. The world learns about the Popov system. History would have taken a completely different path, but he made a different choice. So what exactly did he invent? His device was primarily an ingenious receiver. At the heart of the device was a coherer, a glass tube with metal filings. The coherer is like a switch that is turned on by the invisible touch of a radio wave. The wave arrived, the filings stuck together, the electrical circuit closed, the bell rang. But to receive the next signal, this switch had to be turned off again. For this, Popov added a small hammer that gently tapped the tube after each signal, returning the filings to their original state. So Popov demonstrated working technology, but the world didn't know about it. He created the key but kept it in his pocket due to secrecy and his own convictions. And while he remained silent, on the other side of Europe, a young, ambitious Italian didn't just create his key. He was already finding the right door for it, a door behind which lay immense money and global fame. Meet Guglielmo Marconi, young, energetic, with money and connections. His mother, Annie Jameson, was the heiress of a famous Irish whiskey distilling dynasty. This capital and these connections opened doors for him into the highest society of Britain, the world's leading naval power, which needed wireless communication like air. His goal from the outset was not scientific discovery. His goal was to create a global commercial system. He thought not like a physicist, but like a businessman who had found new oil. Let's put their devices side by side. At first glance, they are almost identical. At the heart of both devices is Edward Branly's coherer. That is, they both did not invent the key element. Imagine they had the same engine. But Popov built a hypersensitive seismograph on its basis to register the slightest tremors, and Marconi built a racing car, and all his efforts were directed at increasing speed and range. Popov created an ideal receiver. Marconi, from day one, created a receiver-transmitter system and obsessively worked on increasing distance. Chronology is a stubborn thing. May 7, 1895. Popov demonstrates the transmission of meaningful text. June 2, 1896. Marconi files his first patent application. Between these dates, a whole year. During this year, the description of Popov's device is published in the Journal of the Russian Physico-Chemical Society and other European publications. Marconi could not have been unaware of these works. Moreover, his scientific advisor at the University of Bologna was Professor Augusto Righi, one of Europe's leading experts on electromagnetic waves. Righi was guaranteed to have read all publications on the subject. All the information was literally in the next room. But Marconi didn't just copy. He took one step that changed everything. He empirically, through trial and error, discovered that if one end of the transmitter was raised high into the air and the other grounded, the signal range increased tenfold. He invented the antenna and grounding in their modern form. If Popov's device was a voice whispering in a library, Marconi, by adding an antenna and grounding, gave that voice a megaphone and placed it on top of a mountain. This was not so much science as it was a brilliant engineering insight. Let's evaluate their contributions. Invention of the principle of information transmission, 100% Popov, based on Hertz's work. Invention of the key component, the coherer, 0% for both, that was Branly. Creation of a working receiver-transmitter system, 100% Marconi. Technical improvement for range, 100% Marconi. And now let's add another point, commercialization and market creation. Popov, 0%. Marconi, 100%. The picture becomes more complex, doesn't it? The technical conclusion? Popov was the first to demonstrate that it was possible. Marconi was the first to make it work practically and over long distances. Technically, the truth is somewhere in the middle, but in history, there are no draws. One winner takes all. So why, if technically they were almost equal, does the whole world know one surname and barely know the other? Because this war was not fought in laboratories with copper wire. It was fought on a field where Popov had no chance, and Marconi had a secret weapon there. This weapon was not a device, it was paper. British patent number 12039. Understand, a patent is not just a document. It is a legal monopoly granted by the state. And Marconi used it not to protect his invention, but to prohibit others from working in this field. It's like patenting not a specific car model, but the very idea of a self-propelled four-wheeled carriage. His patent was so broad that it effectively gave him rights to the very idea of wireless communication. He privatized the air. But a patent is only a license to kill competitors. You also need a weapon, and Marconi created it. He didn't sell radio sets, he sold services. He founded the Marconi Company, which built coastal stations, installed equipment on ships, and most importantly, hired and trained its own radio operators. He created a closed ecosystem, a walled garden, as Apple would say today. And in this garden, there was one iron rule. Marconi operators were strictly forbidden from contacting vessels equipped with competitors' radio equipment. This practice, according to many historians, led to additional casualties during the Titanic sinking. The closest ship, the Californian, might simply not have received the SOS signal because it had equipment from another company. And when the Titanic sank, this ruthless business model turned into the greatest PR campaign in history. Newspapers worldwide screamed, "Marconi Radio saves 700 people." The Titanic tragedy became the first viral marketing campaign in history, born from a disaster. The Marconi Company was no longer selling technology, it was selling safety, hope, salvation. And against the backdrop of this global triumph, the humble instructor from Kronstadt was simply invisible. Think about how many brilliant ideas that could change your life died in the minds of their creators because they didn't have Marconi's weapon. Recall the story of Xerox PARC, where the graphical user interface, the mouse, and computer networking were invented. But it was Steve Jobs of Apple who turned these inventions into a global revolution. The idea is only 1%. Packaging, patent, and marketing are the other 99% of success. This rule worked then, and it works even more brutally today. And what about Popov? He continued his scientific work. He implemented radio communication in the Russian fleet and headed the Electrotechnical Institute. But he never received global recognition during his lifetime. He died in 1906, 6 years before Marconi's triumph on the Titanic. He was only 46 years old. The official cause was a brain hemorrhage. According to contemporaries, his health was undermined by the colossal stress associated with the revolutionary events of 1905, when, as director, he tried to protect his students from inevitable repression. He died protecting people, not patents. Marconi won the battle. He crushed Popov on all fronts, legal, commercial, informational. But was he the only one he fought? In the shadow of this duel stood another genius, whose name is known to everyone today, but who also lost the patent war. And his story makes the picture even more complicated. This man's name was Nikola Tesla. His patents, describing the key principles of radio communication, were obtained earlier than Marconi's. And in 1943, the U.S. Supreme Court officially recognized Tesla's priority. But this was not a triumph of justice, it was a cold calculation. The decision in the case of Marconi Wireless versus United States was made to avoid paying the Marconi Company huge royalties for the use of patents during World War I. By recognizing Tesla as the first, the court simply annulled the financial claims. It was a victory won by lawyers in the interests of the Treasury, not science. The history of innovation is not a relay race where scientists carefully pass the baton of knowledge to each other. It's rugby. A brutal game where the ball is ripped from hands, players are tackled, and the winner is declared to be the one who ran with the ball to the finish line, not the one who started the attack. The invention of radio is a perfect example of this game. The winner here was appointed not by the scientific world, but by the court and the market. The truth is, there wasn't one inventor. In this drama, everyone had their role. Popov was the scientist who first opened the door. Tesla was the prophet who saw a whole new world behind that door. And Marconi was the emperor who walked through that door and built his empire on their ideas. Each of them invented their part of radio, the scientific principle, the technological vision, and the global industry. And now let's change our perspective. What was more important for progress? Popov's pure scientific primacy, or Marconi's creation of a global communication industry that saved people on the Titanic and connected continents. Perhaps the world needed Marconi precisely so that the technology wouldn't remain a beautiful experiment, a museum exhibit in Kronstadt. This is not just a history lesson. This is the operating system of the entire modern innovation economy. The endless patent wars between Apple and Samsung, the fierce disputes over the authorship of CRISPR gene editing technology. It's all the same battle. The legal arguments used in the radio patent wars 100 years ago are still the basis for multi-billion-dollar lawsuits in Silicon Valley. The play is the same, only the actors have changed. So what lessons do we learn from this century-old war for the airwaves? There are only 3, and they work today as ruthlessly as they did then. Lesson 1, Popov's lesson, patent or perish. An idea without a patent is just a gift to a competitor. Think of a patent as a legal force field. Without it, your discovery is defenseless against any predator in the ecosystem. In the modern world, if your invention isn't on paper in the patent office, it simply doesn't exist. Document, protect, patent immediately. Lesson 2, Marconi's lesson. Create an ecosystem, not a product. People don't buy a drill, they buy a hole in the wall. Marconi wasn't selling radio receivers, he was selling communication and safety. He built an entire industry around his technology. This is the same model that Apple uses today with the App Store, Amazon with Prime, and Tesla with its supercharger network. Marconi is the godfather of platform capitalism. Don't think about the product, think about the world it creates. Lesson 3, the Titanic lesson. The best technology doesn't always win, the best story wins. This is the classic availability heuristic described by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. We tend to deem more important what is easiest to recall. The Titanic tragedy made Marconi's story instantly available to every person's mind on the planet. It became a myth. Control the narrative, or it will control you and your legacy. And now the main question for you, based on everything you've seen. Who, in your opinion, is the true inventor of radio? The one who first proved the principle, or the one who gave the technology to the world and made it useful? This is not a simple question. Write just one word in the comments. Popov, if you believe scientific primacy is everything, or Marconi, if practical application and real-world impact are more important. Let's see which of them history should have chosen.